We started Agave as our contribution to building the bench in a strategic way that would make running for office and leading movements more accessible to more and diverse communities. And so we're thrilled to be here tonight.
Thank you,
So
Dawn. And I will just get start off with just a little bit about myself and my connection with Agave. So I am Annalise Ortiz. I am a state senator, as many of you know, but I am here in my capacity as my second job, which is a communication strategist with Agave Strategies. So I'm so honored to work with Dawn and Charles and Kate and the rest of our amazing team. And I come to this work with a degree in journalism and mass communications. I was formerly a TV news reporter before transitioning into a career in strategic communications, working mainly with the ACLU of Arizona, and eventually landing a role here with Agave. And I will hand it back to our founder, Dawn, to introduce herself.
great. Thank you, Annalise. So I talked a little bit about Agave, a little bit about me. My family and I immigrated here from a country that no longer exists. So maybe I should have dropped that as my interesting factoid, but we came here from the country of Yugoslavia, which, if you know your history, went on to have a civil war and so no longer exists and broke up into several other countries. So I mostly grew up here in Arizona, locally grown, and I circulated my first petition, political petition, at the age of 10 years old. So I've been at this a very long time. That petition, if you're curious, was to try to abolish the death penalty here in Arizona. So, you can't win them all. Um, I went on to get into this work through the US Army. I graduated from college and then thought, oh my gosh, what do I do now? So I ended up becoming an Army Public Affairs Strategic Communications Officer. Um, and then after that had sucked my soul out of my body, I came back to Arizona and began working in campaigns. If you've heard of the organization Save Our Schools Arizona, I started that organization along with some other amazing women here in Maricopa County, and then went on to start Agave. Again, like I said, because of my deep interest in building and improving our bench and in making Arizona and our country the kind of place that deserves to have been my family's American dream. So thank you for having me tonight.
Lovely. Thank you so much, both of you, for that. And y'all know me, I think. I hope. If you don't know me, you know Brandon for sure. But I my name is Paulette. I'm the political and senior talent coordinator here at Instituto. And so just very happy to have brought two amazing women that are professionals in this. Not my area of expertise. So take it away, y'all. Whoops, hold on. There we go.
Cool. Well, so as you all know, the title of this session is Crafting Your Personal Story. And one thing that we wanted to share right off the top, Paulette referenced it, this session is going to be really focused not on ending with a polished, finished product, but we'll be leading you through a strategic, very self-reflected exploration of what you already have and what you need in order to craft your personal story. So a personal narrative that conveys your values, your motivation, and your calling to leadership.
So by the end of this session, our goals are to understand the structure and purpose of Story of Self, which is a specific storytelling model created for political organizing. So whether you are planning to run for office and need a stump speech, or you are a leader in a movement space, this is a critical tool that every organizer should really have in their tool belt.
Absolutely. And so if we didn't mention it already, make sure that you have a pencil and pen, a notebook, some markers handy. There are going to be portions throughout the evening where we ask you to jot some things down. There will be some portions where you hop into breakout groups and speak with each other. So have a pen and paper handy if you can. So as Annalise mentioned, the style of story building that we're covering tonight comes out of the organizing movement, specifically one around anti-racism and the labor movement. And so we're going to talk about how this style of personal storytelling is meant to build your credibility, build connection with your audience, whether that is voters or volunteers or fellow movement organizers. And ultimately, regardless of which style of leadership you see for yourself, this is about mobilizing community. So as human beings, we are drawn to stories that are not unique to one person. So let me say that again. We're not drawn to stories that are unique to one person, which might sound counterintuitive. Like, no, actually, that's exactly what I like. I like to know like something different, something that's not like me. But what I'm going to put forward to you to think about is actually that what we are drawn to in stories is the universality of them. What we are drawn to when someone is telling their story is that ability, that natural human instinct to think about how we would feel, what we would do, how we would respond if we were in their shoes. And that's what I mean by the most effective stories are not about one person, one place, one time. They're about those elements of the human experience that we can connect to. So those are things like facing and overcoming struggle, identifying with another group of people or another person who's not exactly like us, and the struggle, the effort of working toward and identifying a common goal. So in this space, in the space of advocacy and organizing and community leadership, those are stories that recognize that there is pain and injustice in the world, but that what is also in the world is us. And in us is the promise of unity and community and improvement. And that's the same hope, that's the same connection that ultimately we want people to feel when they're done listening to a stump speech or a rally speech or, some statements at the beginning of an organization meeting. It doesn't have to always be big and grand. Sometimes your most important audiences are going to be just a few people in a room or even on the phone. So an effective personal story situates you, lets your audience know that you are cognizant of the struggle, that you're asking others to join you in and to follow you on. So we're going to do something all night that's really easy, I think, to latch onto. And if you latch on to nothing but this notion after tonight, you're in good shape. So everything is about triptychs. So everything is about the magic number 3 when it comes to storytelling. And for whatever reason, this is neurologically proven. The human brain just loves groupings of 3. And so the first triptych, the first trio that I want to introduce you to is this notion of the story of self, the story of us, and the story of now, paired with character, plot, and moral. And so that's something we know from fairy tales, right? That we've been listening to our entire lives. Every Disney movie has a character, a lead character, a main plot, and a moral. And that's for a reason, right? Disney knows what they're doing. They know how to tell a good story and to make people want to pay money for it. So character, plot, and moral. And what we're going to work on tonight is building that trio with you as the character. what you will bring as a leader, as the plot, and what you've been through to make you leader worthy, and then the moral, the objective that we're working towards. So let's take just a second here. And if Paulette will help me out, we're going to do our first breakout into groups and just take like about 5 minutes. And whoever you get paired up with, you're going to tell them about an experience that shaped why you care about people. So please, when you get there, if you don't know each other, reintroduce yourselves. Say what you are thinking of as your next steps. Are you thinking of candidacy? Are you thinking of organization leadership? And then I'm going to actually add on a layer here. So instead of just one experience, most of us actually have two pivotal moments in our arc of being called to advocacy, being called to leadership. One of them is usually from the early part of our lives, something that was very shaping, and something more recent. There's a reason this is where you are on a Thursday night. So see if you can actually share two things, something foundational and something more recent. And then we'll pull you back in.
Okay, perfect. So thank you all for engaging in that activity. So we want to debrief a little bit. If just one or two people can unmute and share really what it felt like to tell someone a vulnerable part of yourself, or what it felt like to hear somebody else's story.
Great. So we're gonna tonight like really focus on the structure so that wherever you kind of are in your journey, that you at least know kind of the building blocks, and then you can fill those building blocks or those buckets over time as you really reflect. So the story of self is really rooted in your philosophy of leadership. And if you haven't yet been in a leadership position, that doesn't matter because certainly you've experienced other people in leadership positions. You still know what you think makes someone a good leader, an effective leader, a respectable leader. So this is where your pen and paper is going to come in for just a couple minutes. So jot down these questions if you want to come back to them, or just jot down your answers. But first question to ask yourself is, who is my community? And to break that down a little bit, because that's way too broad, thinking of who is your community, let's ask it in two different ways. Who has your back? So when thinking about who is your community, jot down who has your back. And then if you want a little choice, the next part of that question is the flip side. Who do I show up for? So who has my back and who do I show up for? So let's just take, 30 seconds to jot down the first things that come to mind. And then the next set of questions to locate your leadership philosophy, your vision of leadership, is a question that I'm also going to break down for you. Who am I within my community? So that's the big question. Who am I within my community? And to break that down a little bit more practically, ask yourself, what do I bring? And how do I see my usefulness? So this is really digging deep into yourself. What do I bring to my community? And how do I see my own usefulness? Let's take about 40 seconds with that one. So don't worry, I'm not going to make you share right now. But we are going to have a couple segments later where you'll come back to this and have the option of sharing and connecting what you just brainstormed and reflected in your own notebook. Um, so again, I'm going to bring up that magic number three, so the power of three. And inherent in this question going forward is the self, the other, and action. And so now we're all going to get a treat. Annalise is going to share one version of her stump speeches. And as we listen, think about whether you can start to locate some of what we've already talked about, these structures and these fundamental components in what she shares.
Thank you, Dawn. And this is a stump speech from when I was very first running for office in 2022. So I pulled this speech because I know many of you are possibly running for the first time. And I think it's really important to introduce yourself to this new audience that you're going to need to pull into your campaign or into your advocacy movement. My name's Annalise Ortiz. I am a born and raised Arizonan, a civil rights activist, and a former journalist, and I'm running for the Arizona House of Representatives. When I was a kid, my mom was always cooking for her 6 kids and anyone else who needed a meal. Watching her flour-covered hands roll out tortilla after tortilla, I was learning that our communities are strongest when we take care of one another. I carried those lessons into my first career as a journalist, where I had the honor of telling the stories of brave, resilient people fighting over surveillance of their border community or advocating for their kids who had been killed by gun violence. It made me realize that I could simply report on these change makers, or I could join the fight alongside them. So, after years of school, grueling internships, and cutting my teeth in my first reporting jobs, I made the tough decision to leave it all behind in pursuit of a new career, one defending civil liberties. I joined the ACLU, where I trained people to testify at the state capitol and fight for their civil rights. I knocked on hundreds of doors to help elect Democrats and to get citizens' ballot initiatives on the ballot. And in 2021, I was part of a coalition that successfully passed a bill to ensure women in prison are treated with dignity. Now, as an auntie to 6 kids, I see that far too much has stayed the same for our next generation. Families are still struggling through a pandemic, a crisis, and growing income inequality. We cannot afford to wait for bold systemic change. That's why I'm running for the legislature. As your state representative, I will bring the community to the decision-making table as we fight together for quality public education, clean air and water, and affordable housing. I can't do it alone. Tonight, I'm asking you to join me by donating $25, $50, $100, or whatever you can give. No amount is too small for our people powered campaign. I'm Annalise Ortiz, and I would be honored to earn your support.
Very awesome. Thank you so much. Next slide. So thank you again that I don't know about you, Annalise, but no matter how many speeches I've given, no matter how many times I'm doing this, it's always a vulnerable moment. So thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. So all of us who got to listen to that, Annalise is going to break this down for us more, but what you can drop this in the chat or you can kind of unmute and let us know. But who picked up on the format? So those trios that we've been talking about tonight, challenge, choice, outcome, self, other, action, me, us, now. Did anybody listen and identify those as you were hearing this stump speech? And what did you hear? Which ones jumped out at you?
I'll chime in. I feel like for the Mias now, I heard that in when she's talking about her upbringing with her mom rolling out tortillas, and then it was like them becoming aware of the community, and then it was now with the the conclusion that when we care for each other, we are stronger as a community. So I could see like the lineation leading up to that.
Great. Yeah, absolutely.
I can also chime in on what I've heard. Um, Hi. Thank you so much, by the way. Like, absolutely amazing. But the overarching, like how it started, right? Like what piqued my interest in change, and then the things that I have accomplished to date, right? Like the steady building of accomplishments towards this action. So not only like the threes, like in the middles, but as well as like the overarching.
Yeah, absolutely. And what struck me is not only does the story start with the self, the story of me, right? But it literally starts in her home kitchen. Like there's nothing more me, right? There's nothing more of the self than the kitchen of your childhood home, right? With your mom there. And so just such a visual and so detailed, right? I love that detail. That's the kind of thing that all of us are going to remember, right? Like what was the detail about her mom's hands? I bet every single one of us remembers it. You can drop it in the chat or you can unmute. She talks about them being covered in flowers. So I'll just move us along so that we can get down there.
I have to hit that point finer next time. But yeah, the details are what bring the story to life. And I think that's what we really want to dig into and think about as we continue with your crafting of your story.
So we got to hear one amazing example here tonight, but think about, like, just reflect on other leaders that you have encountered. Maybe you've encountered them in real life, you've heard them actually giving speeches, or maybe you've just seen them on TV, heard them on the radio, that kind of thing. So think about a political or organizing leader that you admire or despise. Sometimes it's easier to think strong thoughts about someone that you really can't stand. Think to yourself, do I know their trio? Do I know their story of who they are, who they're working with, right? Who they care about and what they're trying to achieve? If you stop and think about that, like, our current president comes to mind for me. Yeah, I can absolutely think of his personal story, who he's in community with, and what he's trying to achieve, right? And so that trio is in all of the stories that we encounter and therefore that we want to craft because our human brains are already calibrated to listen for that sequence of topics for that trio. Next slide.
All right, so people really learn who we are from the choices that we make in moments of challenge. And to Dawn's previous point about what politicians come to mind, I still remember cinemas, commercials where she was talking about living in a gas station or something like that. And unfortunately, we all saw how being a senator really worked out for low-income people, did not work out well. But she was trying, obviously, and successfully for a period to convey a choice she made in moments of challenge that taught us about who she is. And I think in my story, one of the things that really is a value is empathy, compassion, but also a resilience and a willingness to fight against injustice. So we really want to make clear that the choices we make are deliberate and that not everyone in the same situation is going to make the same choices. So think about how to frame the choice you made as one that's anchored in values and leadership qualities. So values like what are things you hold dear? Family, compassion, integrity, resilience, those types of values that when you think about who am I and what makes me who I am are what you hold close. So take some moment to write this down in your journal or in whatever papers you might have with you. What are your top three values in life? And for each one, what is a choice that you've made recently that reflects that value? Try to make it as specific and concrete as you can. It can be a big action or a small action. So we'll take about 30 seconds to write silently. Okay. Is there anyone who would like to share something that you jotted down in terms of your value and how it's been reflected in a recent choice?
I can go.
Thank you, Claudia.
So I wrote curiosity and love. And so in terms of curiosity, some things that I feel I've been working on are learning about Prop 50 in order to support our neighbors in California and educate more people on that. And then in terms of love, this past week I have opened my home to a bunch of people who are, need a meal and a place to stay. And it's been really fun. It's like a sleepover every day. Um, and yeah, so those are some things that I wrote down.
That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? Okay, so we are now going to go into a deeper reflection with some more silent writing time because the goal of this is really for you to be digging deep and finding those moments that are going to connect with people in a real, authentic way. So I will hand it to Dawn to explain the next activity.
Yeah, so feel free to go ahead and go off camera if that makes you feel more comfortable as you jot down in your journal. But we're going to take up to 5 minutes and you're going to try to answer these questions. So, a pivotal moment in your life where you faced a challenge that shaped your values, and don't overthink it. This is really meant to be some of the first stuff that comes to mind. You're not going on stage tomorrow, right? You have time, but for now, let's just kind of focus on pick something. Doesn't have to be a life-altering thing. And think about what happened around you. What were the values that were driving how you were feeling, the decisions you had to make in the moment? What choice or choices did you ultimately make? And what were some immediate kind of lessons learned or perspective that you gained? And again, the emphasis here is on just what comes to mind. Don't spend the 5 minutes trying to think of the most important thing that's ever happened in your life. But one thing I want you to do before I stop talking so that you can start thinking and writing is try to zoom in on the details. So Annalise shared that detail from in her stump speech about her mom's hands being covered in flour as she rolled tortilla after tortilla, right? That detail is the kind of thing that in storytelling anchor us. So instead of glossing over the details, if all you do is actually remember the color of shirt you were wearing, what smell was floating through the air, what was the temperature like on your skin, how did your hair feel that day, yeah, right? Did you style it or was it soft, right? Focus in on those details. So now I'm going to stop talking and let you jot down what comes to mind for these 4 questions.
So we want to take a moment to discuss what you reflected on. I know these are very heavy and personal and vulnerable stories that you may have jotted down. But if anyone feels comfortable to share, we would really love to hear what you reflected on, what dots you connected, and what questions you have, or maybe concepts you identified that you would really like to do some deeper exploration on. And if you can characterize your answers into our triptychs of character, plot, moral, or the story of self, the story of us, the story of now, we would love to hear it.
As you guys can see on this slide, we allotted a good amount of time for this because this really is in crafting a story and like getting to that point where you can share it. This is kind of one of those moments where it's not going to feel comfortable. You want to hold back, but really it will propel you forward in your reflection and crafting so much if you are willing to share. This is not about perfection. It's about hearing yourself say things and the light bulb moments that come up from doing that process of sharing. So
I think part of these exercises, right, is to spend as much time as we can with ourselves, with our notebook as we are writing those, so that we can eventually go through the editing process and finding those pieces of the story that are most pivotal to be able to tell in a 2-minute stump speech, which is not an easy task, right? This whole thing we're asking all of you to do tonight is very challenging, but you should feel comfortable in being able to take that time to write a longer piece, right? That you can then go back to and edit. And there are pieces of relatability there, values, as you were speaking, that I felt I can connect to in terms of feeling isolated, feeling misunderstood, or not having someone that you could turn to trust, and having to look around and realize I'm that person. I need to be this leader in this moment. That can help the people around me, and that speaking to the strength in you and the value that you clearly have to lead and care for others. And so all of the elements are there. Really great job. Thank you for sharing. And we're going to get it to a place where it will be, in that format and in a condensed way that is absolutely going to motivate others to action, because it was incredibly powerful what you shared. Thank you.
Thank you.
yeah, if I can just add on to that, you referenced something, Mars, that is a really helpful kind of process for a lot of people. And so I want to kind of put a spotlight on it for those of you who maybe your mind doesn't go directly to that, is you referenced that you were kind of trying to go for a certain one of the trio formats that we talked about. That is such a great way to get yourself started. If you're sitting here thinking like, "Oh my God, I don't know where to start. I've lived a lot of life. Which are the moments and where do I start this story? I can't start 20 years ago or whatever." Kind of forcing yourself to write to the buckets is a great way to, just kind of get the bones in there. And then you'll start to sense what doesn't fit into a bucket, but is really important and you need to make it fit. But that process of going for the categories is a great way to just kickstart the process and figure out where the story begins, where it goes next, where it should end. And yeah, just to echo Annalise, that kind of trope or line about like you weren't looking to become a leader. You were just trying to survive the situation, but the moment called you into the service of leadership. And that is such a powerful and relatable calling that people love to hear, whether they're, voters or organization members or what have you. So thank you to all three of you for sharing.
Can I chime in really fast? I was with Alberto when we first started and like shared, and I that's kind of the struggle that I have, which is why this was like the necessary training I feel like I needed, because I want to talk about everything because I care about everything. Um, and I remember hearing something from one of the former representatives, Athena in LDA, and she'd said something along the lines of like, if not me, who, and if not now, when? And that resonated so much with me. And I think in some of these situations, like we are called, and I think it's super awesome to hear people's stories when you let the hurt and the anger lead you to such awesome things, because not a lot of people know how to like translate that over, right? And they just kind of like let it fester in like negative ways. So yeah, thank you, Mars. I also went on a backpacking trip when I was in like during the pandemic, and I almost died because had a cinnamon allergy, and we were so far out that like nobody could hike me back. But yeah, thank you for sharing.
Of course, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you all. And yeah, I think that as also part of it is that we all have gone through a lot of things in our lives, and we'll find a way to craft, different stories of selves for different audiences, right? Not every story needs to include every challenge you've been through. For example, that speech I shared earlier was a very general speech, but I have another stump speech specifically when I'm talking to a group of abortion rights advocates that goes into detail about my experience being in a domestic violence situation where it's a very, very vulnerable thing that I don't talk about a lot at all, but it's so pertinent to my abortion advocacy specifically that I have created a specific stump speech for that and put myself in a more vulnerable position to talk about it only with those particular audiences. So it's just an important tool to have. All right, we can go to the next slide. All right, so crafting that narrative, right? How do we turn these moments, these huge moments in our lives, into a coherent story? And what are the elements, what are the ingredients that are going to make this a story that sticks with people and motivates them to join us in a very challenging fight that we are fighting in this moment in history? So shared stories create unity and the sense of a relationship. I don't know about y'all, but I definitely feel right now that I know Mars and Alberto and Claudia better than I did before we started this training, right? Knew Claudia and Alberto, and I feel like now it's more of a eye opener into who you are and why you're called to this work. And Mars, it's been an awesome thing to meet you and everyone else who's shared as well. So once that relationship is formed, there's a natural desire to coordinate choices, values, and strategy. Strategy is the most important way that we move policy goals or that we move a voter to vote at the ballot box. With a coordinated strategy comes coordinated action and outcomes. So what are those strategic elements of our stump speeches that we are going to need in a story? We are going to need an introduction of who you are. And we can do that by starting off with the quick and dirty elements. Here's who I am, here's what I do, and here's what I'm running for, right? Again, all depending on your audience. But you really want to start the meat of your story with something about yourself, an anecdote that is going to make the audience feel that natural relationship with you right off the bat. This will demonstrate and allow you to state your values and beliefs that they can connect with. In my stump speech, talking about my mom cooking and caring about community and sharing food, not just with her 6 kids, but with the community, that helps people to see the values that I was raised with, the beliefs that it is about community, that family is very important. Those are the kind of values that came across just by sharing a story of cooking in the kitchen with my mom. Your stump speech should be your authentic voice. This is so, so important. That you need to be, your most comfortable, best version of yourself, and that is your authentic self. And whether you're talking to voters or people you're organizing or donors, they are going to want to hear the true and blue you because they could sniff out a phony politician very easily. Many of us know that. That's probably why many of us are actually running. So we could be an alternative. Your stump speech should be based in the interests of the audience in front of you. So as I just mentioned, I have a stump speech specifically if I'm talking to abortion rights advocates. I have done a lot of work and my expertise is in criminal justice reform, which is a very niche policy area. So when I'm talking to a crowd of defense attorneys or formerly incarcerated people or people who have loved ones in prison, my stump speech sounds very different. because it is an audience that really understands and cares about this niche issue of criminal justice reform. So you will have to get comfortable with tweaking your stump speech. And then finally, your stump speech makes a hard ask. I cannot emphasize how important this is. A hard ask is donate $25 or $50 or $100. A hard ask is not saying, if you can contribute, that would be great. We would really appreciate it, right? That's not a hard ask. That's a soft ask. We need to be very clear about what we need from the audience. If we're doing advocacy work, the ask is call this number and tell Senator Mark Kelly to hold the line and not give in on the budget negotiations, right? We need to make it very crystal clear what we are asking of the audience. It should never be dancing around, because you have a captive audience of people who have followed you through on this 2-minute or 3-minute journey of sharing your story of self. You have now built a relationship with them. You cannot just let that moment fall through your fingers. You have to make the hard ask with this captive audience that you have and make it very clear what you need them to do. Next slide. All right. Dawn?
All right. So one thing, again, this whole session is about giving you the tools that, you can go on after tonight and actually start to write this stuff. And so something that I want to put forward as a really good strategy for that relates to something that Annalise was just saying. What we write, the stories we tell, are always going to be tweaked, calibrated according to the audience we're speaking to. And as you go out, whether it's as a candidate or as an advocacy leader, you're going to do that as well. And so it can be a really effective to kind of get the juices flowing, to step into a level of comfort, to actually try to hit these 3 buckets, this trio, from a smaller story. Like, envision yourself only talking to a group of LGBTQ allies and advocates. And if that's the easier story to write, write to only that audience first. Or envision yourself talking only to a group of housing reform advocates, and then write that story. You don't have to tackle your general life story, your penultimate stump speech, first. In many ways, maybe that's the last thing you write. Write those more specific, focused stories. Just make sure that they hit this format, because this is the format that you're going to replicate for everything else. And so when you craft your own story, you're building a through line from talking about yourself to talking about the we, the us, the community, to talking about what we can do, what we can achieve together. And so that through line is going to become more and more clear and easy for you the more you practice it. So again, start with the smaller ones. So in a moment, we're gonna separate again to give you some time to start developing your own story, or for those of you who already have a little something in various forms of completion, to maybe revise some or multiple parts of it. And so now I'm going to call something out that it's always a good thing to call out kind of in this moment. Has anybody ever heard the phrase imposter syndrome before?
Lots of head nods.
Okay. So I want to call that out because it affects most of us. It affects me. It affects lots of people who've been doing this stuff a very long time. But I want to call it out so that we can dismiss it. It's a thing. Lots of us feel it. In this session and in this world, we're just going to throw it out for now, because everyone has a story. It is impossible to be alive and not have a story. Okay. And you can know the proof that your story is meaningful, at least some of them, is that you're here tonight. Because if your story wasn't powerful, you wouldn't have been called to show up to this. You wouldn't be considering this possibility in your life. You wouldn't be considering service and leadership. Okay, so throw out the imposter syndrome. You have a story, and we know that your story is powerful because it moved even you. And if you've ever heard the expression, we are always our own worst critic. So that means if you were moved by it, guess what? Other people are going to be moved by it too, because they're an easier audience than we are for ourselves. Next slide.
So we are now going to go into 15 minutes of personal work time of drafting a 2 to 3 minute story skeleton using the template of the story of self. So we want you to think and start crafting the story with answering of the questions, who am I? What happened that called me to leadership, right? That's that challenge piece. What choice did I make and why? What value does this reveal? That's kind of the us piece where we're pulling in how we connected with other people and who shared those similar values, right? And then finally, how does this connect to why I'm thinking of running or organizing now? What is the final ask that we have on this journey of either running for office or leading our advocacy organization? So we'll go ahead and give the time to go ahead and start writing quietly for 15 minutes. And when we come back, we'll get into small groups and we will do a small group share. One of the things that I had mentioned to the person who said it was that you are qualified. You are here for a reason. And there are moments in your life that you have been a leader, and it might not look like what Claudia's experience has been or what my experience has been, right? But you need to spend some time with your journal, just writing through what are those moments that I have been a leader? What are those moments that I have proven myself to be the right person for this job in this moment? Whether it is being a leader in your workplace or volunteering at different organizations, or maybe you are that person who walks into your church and everybody knows you and is shaking your hand and is asking you for resources. Those are the little things of change that we are doing every day as leaders that we are not stopping to pat ourselves on the back for, because that's not what we do as leaders, right? It's not comfortable to do that. But if you take some time to just start writing, what are those moments, those accomplishments that make me qualified for this job? Then you find a way to take that and fit it back into the boxes, right? Into the story of me, the story of us, the story of now, so that you can have those 1 or 2 examples of I accomplished this and I accomplished that, and now I'm running because, right? And always remembering that it will be different for each person, and that's okay. All right, we are running short on time here. So we want to get to the closing of this, and I know there's so much that we could talk about all night, and Dawn and I are going to leave our contact information. So if you have, questions that you didn't get to, we will be able to connect with you. But we would really love to hear your feedback for this training, so that we can make sure we can help other people in future trainings get the most out of this. And part of that feedback might be that we need some more time. So we can go to the next slide. And
One more.
this one. There we go.
Lovely. All right, y'all. Well, we've reached that point of the night. Since you all have been here before, y'all know that we love our surveys at Instituto. So just drop the link to the survey, or if you want to scan the QR code, you are more than welcome to. Like Annalise said, this helps us in knowing where y'all are at and what else we need to bring in for next year's programming. So once you've decided, you say, all right, I'm all in, how do I get ready to file? We do have that programming next come I think February 2026. So definitely let us know if this is helpful, where you're at. And while you're doing that, I'll have, before we do we'll end off with one word that we're leaving with, but I want to give Agave a chance to tell us a little bit more about getting involved with them.
Yeah, thank you. So just following up on that, this is one stepping stone in the process toward, your ultimate goal of running or stepping into a higher leadership position. So you're not alone after these sessions end. So one thing that Agave does and that we partner with Instituto on to make people aware of is our campaign in a box. So this is basically making a one-stop shop so that you don't have to know 17 different people to figure out how to start a campaign, how to run a campaign. And so anybody who goes through these programs, we do kind of special entry points for, but this is available. Once you make this step, the next thing is making your team. And so we wanted to make you aware there are people out there rooting for you, ready to help you. And at Agave, we love to do that. I think that, let's see. So you can see all our info there. You can contact me or Annalise anytime when that day comes, or if you just want to start thinking about that day.
Love. Um, as for the Instituto Power side, we have a new website, a new social media. Follow us if you're not. institutopower.io. We're building it out. Like it's pretty good now, but we are trying to expand so that candidates, people that are interested in exploring the idea of running can just go here and fill out their information. So you'll find Know Your Elected Official search tool, open election seats. So if you're like, what's going on in my district? We got you. We're also scheduling, there's more like candidate and staff training resources, trainings. And we also are doing one-on-ones. So if you're like, I want to talk, I need more help, please reach out to us. I think we have been reaching out to y'all already if you've attended the events, and because you've attended this one in our post event email, we do have information for you all to book 30 minutes with us so that we can just get a sense of where you're at, what you're thinking. Maybe you're not trying to run this election cycle, maybe you're trying to figure it out, maybe you want to support a campaign, who knows. But with that, let me go back and Dawn, if you want to end us off.
Yeah. So you can just drop this in the chat, but if you're going to fill in that blank, where do you feel like you are? So after this session, and there's going to be some kind of verb. It could be think about, brainstorm, revise, write, deliver. Where do you feel like you're at right now towards your story of self? And I'll just put a little plug that I think I forgot to say. Once you fill out the survey at the QR code or the link, we also made a cool handout that walks you through a bunch of what we did tonight in a really pretty, like well-organized way. So Paulette will send that out once you fill out the surveys in case your notes are messy, like mine would be. And I can't read my own handwriting tomorrow.
That's true. That's true. The worksheet will be included after you fill it out. And then this recording will be uploaded probably by the end of the day tomorrow in case you want to reference it.
Great. So craft, workshopping, start thinking about all awesome answers. Well, we are here for all of you as you continue this process. Writing is recursive, storytelling is communal. So always take advantage of the people in your corner, and that is definitely us. So it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good night. And thank you so much, Agave, for joining us.
Thank you.
Enjoy your nights, everybody.